intentional. Skeptics argue otherwise, and over the months we've been seeing attacks largely online, having surged focusing on the East African crude oil pipeline. And on the commercial side, close to $20 billion is going to be injected in this project, and some of them, of course, initial stages have already started, especially in Tilenga and Kingfisher project. Now, this is almost half of Uganda's GDP in reflection of 2021, and according to the UBOS statistical abstract from 2021 into 2022. However, on the side of investment will have a ripple effect. Employment, you're looking at contracts for Ugandans, plus stimulating other sectors which will provide goods and services. And the projection to start reaping from this project in oil and gas is the year 2025. Which is in a few months, by the way. And so we get to have an update from that regard. We are joined this morning by the Corporate Affairs Manager with the Petroleum Authority Uganda, and that is Gloria Sebikari. You are most welcome.
Thank you, Priscilla. I'm happy to be in the studios today.
Okay, so first of all, we want to understand as a country, I know that we have moved leaps and bounds from country to country, coming together and signing agreements and treaties and arrangements for this East African crude oil pipeline to take effect at some point X, and then starting off the project, to calling for bids and contractors to come on board and start some of the stages that need to be kicked off now in order to prepare for the ripple effect starting 2025. But on ground and in reality, where do we stand with the projects that have already started exercise? I know that we do have the Tilenga, which is in Bulisa district, and I also do know about the Kingfisher project in Chikube district. So could you give us an update first on those two?
Thank you, Priscilla. Yes, we have moved leaps and bounds since 2022, when the final investment decision for these projects was announced by the oil companies and governments. But before I give the update, I think it's important for us to appreciate that much as we are targeting fast oil in 2025 commercial production, people or the country is already reaping a lot of benefits from these projects. Why? Because there's a lot of activity on ground, and as you mentioned, contracts, employment, and a lot of benefits are coming into the country. So the benefits are here now, and not just in 2025 when commercial production starts. Now, moving on to what is happening in the projects. So we typically categorize the oil and gas projects into two: the upstream projects, and by upstream we mean the projects from where the oil will be produced, and then the midstream projects that will enable us to commercialize the oil, to sell the oil or to export it. Now, for the upstream projects which you mentioned, that is Tilenga and Kingfisher. So these two projects are the projects that are being developed to enable us produce our oil. Tilenga is located in Bulisa and Kingfisher is in Chikube district. For the Kingfisher project, the peak production expected is 40,000 barrels of oil per day. Now, a lot of work is going ahead to enable us reach that milestone. In January 2023 this year, we kicked off the drilling of wells for these projects. And to date, they've concluded drilling the first well for the Kingfisher project. And now their preparations are ongoing to drill the other two wells which have been cleared for drilling. So there's a lot of work going on in terms of drilling the wells from where the oil is going to be produced. But alongside that, there are a number of preparatory works going on to ensure that we have all the facilities necessary to enable us produce. And so when you produce oil, it goes to what we call a central processing facility. And so also work to build that central processing facility is going on, because when the oil comes out of the ground, it's mixed with gas, with water, with other components from the ground. So it has to first be processed or cleaned before it is transported either to the refinery or the pipeline. So there's site clearance works that are ongoing. This is a central processing facility is in essence a factory or a big industrial complex. And so the earthworks or the civil works that take place are huge in nature. And this is one of the areas that we are seeing a lot of Ugandan companies participating. There is a clearing of the ground, there is a compacting of the areas, doing a lot of tests because the facilities that are going to sit on these places are huge, and so we must ensure that the technical specifications for the ground are met. So there's a lot of clearing work going on before the actual construction of this processing facility goes on. There's also been a clearing of land for the feeder pipeline, which is another facility that is needed, because once the oil is produced from the wells, it's processed in the central processing facility. It needs to be transported to the refinery or to the start point of the crude export pipeline, and that is done by a feeder pipeline. Kingfisher will have about a 46-kilometer pipeline that will move from Chikube district to Hoima, where the refinery will be located. So clearance work has been done along that pipeline route, 46 kilometers, and some of the equipment, the pipes have been delivered on ground. So there's also work going on to start doing the work on these pipelines. Now when we go down to the Tilenga project, the facilities are similar. We're going to have drilling of wells, a central processing facility, and a feeder pipeline. The difference is that whereas the Kingfisher project will have a peak production of 40,000 barrels of oil per day, the Tilenga project will produce 190,000 barrels of oil per day. So that's almost 5 times the size of the Kingfisher project. So in the Kingfisher project, we expect about 31 wells to be drilled on 4 well pads. In Tilenga project, we have about 420 wells on 31 well pads. So in the Tilenga project, we'll have 3 drilling rigs, whereas for the Kingfisher project, we have 1 drilling rig, which started drilling in January. For Tilenga project, we have 3 drilling, 3 drilling rigs. 2 of the rigs are already up and running, and 1 rig is still under construction. So for the Tilenga project, work has already, drilling also started towards the end of June. And so work is also progressing on that front. Regarding the central processing facility for the Tilenga project, it's going to sit on an area of about 600 plus acres. So it's a huge complex. As I mentioned, it's almost 4 or 5 times that of the Kingfisher project. So the site clearance works for that industrial complex are going on because it will host the central processing facility. It will also host camp yards, a permanent camp, a 4,000 person camp. So and on that camp, about I think close to 1,200 units have been completed on the camp and in use. It will also have a drilling support base, meaning that the people that are drilling the wells will have their equipment, etc. based in that area. It will have a construction camp. So it will be like a city on its own within that area. So there's a lot of work going on those different components of what we call the industrial area. But the main facility is that central processing facility. So we can say that we are on track in terms of the Kingfisher and Tilenga projects to have the facilities in place to enable us reach first oil in 2025.
All right. Well, Gloria, thank you so much for that update. It definitely sounds promising, and it gives Ugandans hope that surely, as you've said, the projects are on track. However, as these projects are continuously taking center stage, previously we did have Uganda on the spotlight. There was even orchestrated protests. Some, recommendations that came from the European Union perspective on the pipeline. They were talking about environmental concerns. They were concerned about the compensations of the people that had to be relocated from their lands to somewhere else. And in regards to these issues, have they been streamlined and addressed as the projects are going on, or they've taken a backseat?
They have been streamlined, and Uganda's projects are being developed in line with our local legislation, but also international best practice standards, meaning that we have people at the heart of the development of the projects, but we are also ensuring that we coexist with our rich biodiversity, with our rich environment, and the other activities that are taking place. The protests or the contestation that you have spoken about have mainly been around the East African crude oil pipeline, which is an exit route for our crude oil. Now, a lot of the people, some of the people who are speaking against the projects want us to stop the pipeline. But what they do not appreciate, and sometimes it's from an uninformed perspective, is that these projects are integrated. You cannot say stop the pipeline but develop the refinery, or stop the pipeline but develop Kingfisher. The pipeline provides an exit route for our crude oil to reach the export market, and it affects the ability or profitability of these other upstream projects. Now, what is being done to ensure that these projects are developed sustainably is, first of all, we have the right laws in place to ensure that we have our environment protected. These laws have been updated from when they were developed in the 90s and 80s. We have the National Environment Act of now 2019, which was updated mainly to provide for issues related to petroleum. There's a whole string of regulations on air quality, waste management, noise standards, etc. that have been put in place. Now, beyond just having the laws and regulations, because they provide the foundation, we cannot do without the legal framework, we are also practically implementing initiatives to ensure that the projects are environmentally safe. One of those, first, is from the technical design of the projects. I talked about the rigs that we are using. Instead of drilling 420 wells on individual locations, we are drilling about 12, 15 wells on one well pad, meaning that the rig just moves or slides from one location to the other. That means you're minimizing. We have taken steps to minimize the environment footprint. Okay. Secondly, these rigs they have sound suppression systems, so such that when they are running, you can hardly hear any noise. We recently took a group of journalists, including from NTV and your sister stations, to the operations to see the work that's going on. So there is very little intrusion in the natural environment. On top of that, each of these projects has been subjected to an environment and social impact assessment. So we know the potential negative impacts, we know the positive impacts, and there are audits, there are mitigation measures too that have been put in place.
On the assessment that you have mentioned, how regular are these assessments going to be?
So they are at different levels. Okay. Once you do an assessment, do the environment and social impact assessment, the mistake or the misconception some people have is that it's just once you get the approval, that's it. It's actually a working document that guides the project. So it is used to audit the project throughout its lifetime. How often are these audits done? There are different levels. As the Petroleum Authority of Uganda, we are the lead regulator in the oil and gas sector. So we are at these operation sites 24/7. So we have staff trained in different disciplines. We have engineers, geologists, environmental science, national content people, economists, who are stationed at these projects on rotation on a daily basis. So at every activity, we do have people on ground to monitor all these things to ensure compliance throughout across the board. And then there is another level of monitoring that is done at institutional level. So because we do not work in isolation as the Petroleum Authority, we work with other government agencies like NEMA, Uganda Wildlife Authority, Forestry Authority, Water Resources Departments. So there's a supervisory monitoring that is done both on a monthly as a Petroleum Authority and a quarterly basis as joint institutions. And we also have operation meetings where we sit with the companies and discuss the status of the projects, what's going right, what can be improved, and so monitoring is a daily activity for us as the authority.
Okay, all right. So let's bring it back to national oil content. How are we faring as Ugandans, and what are we looking to reap at the end of the day when 2025 comes in conclusion? Okay,
Priscilla, you rightly mentioned that 15 to 20 billion dollars is being invested. Our target is to see that of that investment in these 3 or 4 years, that's why I said the opportunity is now, we retain at least 40%, and we are already seeing the fruits of the work that we are doing in regulating national content. When it comes to employment, one of the parameters that we look at, to date about 12,900 people are working on these different projects across the board. Of these 12,900, 94% are Ugandans. That's about slightly over 11,000. 94% are Ugandans. When we dig deeper, we have what we call community content, because these projects are in local communities. We have about 3,800 people from the local communities, the host communities, doing different work on these projects at all levels, basic skills, specialized, and the like. Then when it comes to issuing contracts, this $15 billion that we are talking about, as the authority, part of the work that we do is approving contracts that are going out. And we look out for Ugandan companies' value retention in the economy. So we've approved contracts close to $7 billion. And of that, about 1.7 billion is earmarked for Ugandan companies. We've seen about 460 Ugandan companies participate in the projects, and of this we have even about 41 companies from the areas Hoima, Bulisa, that have gotten contracts of about $2.5 million. And so we dig deep to make sure for areas that we see, because the oil and gas sector is fairly new, there are services that are not available in the country. We have encouraged the formation of joint ventures between Ugandan and foreign companies so that we can have technology and skills transfer, and we see Ugandan companies now doing specialist work that was previously not available in the country.
All right.
Lastly, there's a lot of training and capacity building that's going on, both capacity building of SMEs, because we want to encourage the growth of private sector-led businesses. So we are working with different partners to train SMEs on things like bid management, having health and safety policies, but also empowering Ugandan institutions like the Uganda Petroleum Institute at Chigumba, and other private players like Q-Sourcing, Seawall Energy, that have trained over 12,000 Ugandans in various trades and disciplines at internationally certified level. Well, so we can say a lot of value is being retained.
A lot of value,
in the country.
And we're grateful for the work that is being done, of course, by the Uganda Petroleum Authority in ensuring that at all levels there's retention of benefit to Ugandans. Well, thank you so much, Gloria Sebikari. She's the Corporate Affairs Manager with the Petroleum Authority in Uganda, and she's given us hope that there's much the country needs to tap into so that we can retain it, so as to add to the national coffers. That brings us to the end of our business update in regards to the oil and gas sector in Uganda.